So it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to our webinar tonight. Everything you need to know about starting a business in Portugal. Our special guest tonight, Daniel Reis from Reis Pellicano.
Hello.
How are you, Daniel?
Good evening. I'm quite all right, The spring is coming up, so it's nice to be in Lisbon.
Yes, and you've given us some really nice checking the pulse of Lisbon over the last few months.
Yeah.
Can we have an
Well,
update today?
the city is looking a bit as it was before the pandemic, so not as it was, of course, but it's pacing up, and you see more people in the streets. Sporting my club just won the cup, so I'm happy about it. And there was a big party just across the street on of my office, and it seems that we are getting back to what it was before the pandemic. Although the reality is still not surpassed. There's a lot of people that still need to be vaccinated, but the pulse of the city is becoming good, and you see a lot of foreigners in the streets, especially European citizens, and this does mean that Lisbon is becoming attractive again for foreigners, and it's with great pleasure that we do hope to receive them all this summer with arms open.
Yes, indeed. Great news. Thank you for that. A kind of in a doctorly role there, as well as a legal capacity. He's not a real doctor, I hasten to add.
No.
He is of the law firm Reis and Pellicano, and giving us the information we need to know about starting a business in Portugal. First of all, then, from that point of view, could you just tell us briefly, for people who've not met you before, and there will be those people, a little bit about yourself and your company, please, Daniel?
Okay, well, the company RP International was founded by me and my business partner, Rodolfo. We perceived that the law firms in Portugal were usually not directed to foreign clients. It was more directed to Portuguese clients or to Portuguese corporations. So we decided to focus our main core business in the clients still outside of Portugal that want to invest in the country, buy property here, do golden visas, as well as the taxation that I covered last webinar, and incorporation. So we of course always followed what the clients wanted it, and we saw a big movement of people that migrated to Portugal wanting to start a business. There's a lot of studies across the world that states that people that do migrate are usually entrepreneurs, because if they have the correct mindset to migrate, they have the correct mindset to do a successful corporation and to be good entrepreneurs. So we follow the market, and here at RP, we probably incorporated more than 100 companies across the years that we have been working, and it's with great pleasure that I usually present the title of the company and all that to our clients. Although it's a path not so easy because of the regulations here in Portugal after the incorporation is done, but it's still a path worthwhile taking.
Excellent. Thank you very much for setting the scene there. So let's get into it. I mean, maybe the thing to do is I know you're really brilliant with this in creating a step-by-step, the framework, the spine of the, around which the whole skeleton is hanging. So could we do that first and then return to it? But if we could do our step-by-step, just to give people an idea, and then we'll dive deeper into each of those areas.
Yeah, of course. Well, usually to incorporate a company here in Portugal, the first thing that we do is obtain an NIF. The NIF is the tax number, the Portuguese tax number, and without it, you cannot do anything here in the country. So you cannot buy a property, you cannot acquire a car, and you cannot be a partner of a corporation. So the first step, without any doubt, would be to obtain an NIF.
Yep.
The second step it does depend if the person that wants to incorporate is in Portugal or not. We have incorporated quite a lot of companies for people that are living outside of the country, and this is totally possible to do everything at a distance. It doesn't need to be, people don't need to come to Portugal to incorporate, because after obtaining the NIF, we do a specific power of attorney that will have the signatures notarized. And if you just FedEx the POA, the power of attorney to us, we can take care of all the full ordeal without the prospective entrepreneur even setting foot in Portugal. The incorporation procedure is done online nowadays. It can be done presentially, but we choose to do it online. It's usually faster. And we do draft the minutes of incorporation, see if everything is correct and it does correspond to what the client wants, and then submit that document to the registry. Once that document is submitted, usually it takes, I would say, 2 to 3 days to have the final registry if things are going normally. And once the company is finally registered within the commercial registry of Portugal, we need to do the next step, and that would be the registry of the effective beneficiary of the company. This step is a new step that was implemented about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and it was something that came out of the EU regulations to try to avoid shell companies within shell companies, that the effective people behind the capital, and that would be beneficiaries of the company, would not be identified. So it was something to try to avoid money laundering and all that. The following step is opening a corporate bank account. The corporate bank account, we usually deal with a bank here in Portugal. We send the documentation on behalf of the client to the bank, the minutes of incorporation, the registry, the passports, and request the bank to open a bank account. The bank contacts the entrepreneur, verifies what I've stated in all the documentation that I sent, produces all the necessary paperwork, and then or either sends the documentation abroad to have the signatures notarized and sent back to the bank, or if the person incorporating is already in Portugal, they can just go into the counter and sign the necessary paperwork, and the bank account is usually open in, I would say, 24 to 48 hours. So it's a fairly easy process. The final step would be opening the activity within the tax authorities. So this is a step that's usually done by the accountant here in Portugal, and it's a simple communication of the accountant with the tax authorities, stating that the new company was incorporated and that company is ready to invoice. And after all these steps are fulfilled, we hope comes a profit and a long business line and a successful idea to develop the country's economy as well as everyone's pockets. That's basically it.
Yes, the ultimate aim there that we got to.
Yes.
step 8 there. And we should also say that we're going to go into the 2 types of company in just a moment, and also there will be people who want to register as self-employed too, as well, and operate as consultants, so we can cover all of those things. Denise says she's in drug and medical device regulatory services, to have an idea of some of the people here on the webinar tonight and what they're hoping to do in Portugal. Amit in the US, looking at expanding existing software business in the EU, so an expansion plan there. Hi everyone, from Deborah. I live in central Portugal and establishing a training school here to help others move on to the land. So that's great news in terms of the renaissance in central Portugal and encouraging people to go to central Portugal and get growing again. So yeah, any more ideas about anything you want to give away about your business, please do that in the chat. With that step-by-step there, Daniel, can we have an idea of timescales? Because there are 2 scenarios that I can see immediately. One is for the person who wants to get it all set up before they come, and then somebody who's here already, and those processes will be will change in timing, won't they? So can we have a rough idea of the timescales of those 8 steps?
Well, for usually people that want to incorporate while they are abroad, it's usually to request a D2 visa or an entrepreneur visa.
Okay.
And that's why we do company incorporations at a distance, because sometimes it's not convenient for the client just to come to Portugal, incorporate, and then just wait for the visa to be approved outside of the country. So that is the main reason that we do incorporations at a distance via the POA. I would say that the timelines are roughly the same, apart from the POA part. So obtaining the NIF, it will take the same time, but drafting the POA, sending the POA to the place where the person is, having the signatures notarized, and then sending the original back to us, usually does take, I would say, an extra 2 weeks, give or take, to have this all done, because the signatures not only need to be notarized, but the POA will need to be either apostilled or passed throughout the Portuguese consulates and throughout the Foreign Ministry affairs. So a few more steps are necessary for the POA part. But after that is cleared, the rest of the process is exactly the same and doesn't change a lot. When I was preparing this webinar, on the notes that I sent you, I've put a strong advert over there regarding the taxation. And this is something that I usually do cover in my webinars. Once I incorporate a company in Portugal, I usually pass on the following information. You can leave debts to everyone, to the workers, because they have a fund that covers all the debts to workers. You can leave debts to service providers. You can leave debts to the electricity and utility bills. But please, 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 I strongly advise that you don't leave debts to the tax authorities or Social Security in Portugal. This is because the manager of the company, not the partners, just the manager of the company, has the obligation to make sure that the company does pay its fiscal obligations within the tax authorities. If the company goes bankrupt, if it goes under, the Portuguese state or all the creditors will assess what is the debts, the credits of the company, and if the company doesn't have enough money to repay the Portuguese state, and the Portuguese state is the first in line to get repaid, what happens is the phenomenon or the legal application of the fiscal reversion. And this does mean that the manager will be liable on his own personal pockets to pay the debts of the company. So let's say that the company goes under with 20,000 euros in debts to the Social Security as well as the tax authorities. The manager of the companies will be personally liable for those debts. So if business is not going well, the best thing that it should be done is close down the company, so the situation is not increasing or is not getting worse. If by any chance you do need to do the decision of paying the Portuguese state first and any other creditors later, do this choice because it is the wise one. And do believe me that the Portuguese state does prosecute people until the last penny. And one other important detail is that if a company is owing more than, it's around 7,500 euros in debts to the tax authorities or the Social Security, it is considered crime in the Portuguese penal code. So not only a crime for the company, but for the manager as well that didn't repay those debts. This is usually this happens usually with the VAT, because the VAT is paid by the clients, the customers to the company. The company receives those 23% and needs to deliver that every trimester. But some entrepreneurs, when they have the choice of paying their workers or paying the states, they do prefer to pay the workers. And I do understand it's a human feeling. You have another human being just across the table, and you know the needs of that person. But if this does happen, the Portuguese state doesn't know that, or will not care that you did the correct choice of paying your workers first, but will go into the manager's pockets. Just to be sure, this does not affect all the partners, but affects only the manager or the managers of the corporation. But usually for small enterprises, you have 2, 3 business partners and 1 or 2 managers, and usually they do coincide. So the manager is usually one of the business partners.
So whoever is known to be the manager bears that responsibility.
Correct. It's the manager, or in Portuguese, the gerente.
And it sounds like the fiscal authorities, a little like Liam Neeson down the phone.
Yeah.
I will. Okay. All right. Very interesting. And that may lead us neatly then onto the types of structure that might in some way mitigate liability, as some people are used to from their country of origin. But obviously, you're painting a very serious picture there with that ultimate responsibility. But I think looking at the company structures now, the 2 general types will give people, will further clarify that for people. Anybody who was under the impression that they thought limited liability was the same in Portugal as it was when they came, might not be the case, right?
Well, it is the case. This only happens for the Portuguese state and for the manager. So if you're only one of the business partners, you shouldn't be concerned, because this will not affect any of your own belongings. This is some responsibility of the manager, and it's just to warn, or it's just for people to have in mind that the manager has a big responsibility in the company. The manager in Portugal is the person that legally binds the company. So all the contracts, from work contracts, service provider contracts, is the manager that does sign all the paperwork, and not the partners. So I would say that the main role in a company is of a manager, and the partners can just have a silent role of being the capital investors, and just obtain the profits at the end of the year. But there is a clear separation in what is all the assets of the company and the assets, the personal assets. There is a clear separation on that, and the 2 do not mix. And this is usually something that foreign clients do have some difficulty in accompanying, because in other countries like Brazil or the US, if you have a company that you are a sole shareholder, there is a way of moving the funds between your personal account and the business account that is quite easy. Here in Portugal, the separation is quite clear, and it is mandatory to have an accountant. You cannot own a company without having an accountant nominated, and that accountant will be responsible to deliver all the paperwork to the Portuguese state regarding any fees or any taxes that need to be paid. So I usually say that the accountant, it is the best partner of the entrepreneur in Portugal, because even better than lawyers, the accountant can explain in practical terms what are the taxes that need to be paid, how much does need to be paid, and the accountant is the person that sends all the documentation to the business holders to pay the correct fees. So what I usually see for new entrepreneurs in Portugal is that they should choose an accountant that is near you, so someone that you have established a good degree of confidence. If it's necessary to visit 2 or 3 accountants, then do so, because especially in the beginning, the accountant is quite an important person for the entrepreneur. And there's no way around it. It's a legal obligation. You do need to have an accountant. Another obligation that people should be aware once they incorporate would be the social security of the manager. Even if the manager is not receiving any income, he does need to pay social security on at least for 150 euros per month. So as a general rule of thumb, with the social security expenses, as well as the accounted expenses, you can count with the company that is dormant, that is not invoicing 1 single cent, with an expense around 300 euros, 350 euros per month. So I would say that the timing of opening a corporation in Portugal, it is important. If you want to move straight away into implementing your business, then jump into the incorporation. But if it's something that it's not yet established all the foundations, then just wait into the correct time. Because if the person is already in Portugal, incorporating is a process that can take up to 1 week to 1 week and a half, give or take.
Very interesting. So that's quite a big standing responsibility without any money being invoiced there, isn't it?
It is.
$3,500
It
a
is.
year just to keep the company going.
Yeah.
And to
Indeed.
reiterate there, people will need to have a proper understanding of what is meant by a manager of a company. Sounds a little bit to me, I mean, my own experiences with the UK, and it sounds a little bit like the company secretary role rather than a manager as you might understand.
Yeah, in Portugal, it's called gerente. And let's say that it is the CEO. If you want to call it on another terms, the manager is the CEO, and the CEO is the person that legally binds the company. It can be one of the partners, or it can be a totally separate person. If, for instance, me and Astrid had a company together, we could nominate you, Carl, as the manager. That wouldn't be a problem.
And why wouldn't you, given all that you said?
That's already happened, Daniel, and Astrid and I have nominated Carl.
Oh yeah, that's a good example.
It's a bit brilliantly educational. So everybody, bye. Joey and Deb here from Colorado, USA tonight, hoping to relocate to Portugal and open a yoga meditation retreat. Fantastic, an event center showcasing local music and artists. Brilliant, a business idea there that's being shared. Joanna and Mark, we run a web design and online marketing agency. Excellent. We're not in the countries yet. Another central Portugal, a couple there by the sound of it. We'll come back to more of your business ideas, but also some great questions coming in. But I don't want to break Daniel's flow there. Just getting into some real detail now, and we will come back to your questions, which are excellent and plentiful in the chat already tonight. So can we go a bit further into those two distinctions then, the basic types and a little bit about self-employment, please, Daniel?
Yeah, of course. Well, in Portugal, you have, generally speaking, two types of companies. The limited liability company, we call it in Portugal, Sociedade por Cotas, and this limited liability company can either be one shareholder company, that would be unipessoal, one person shareholder company, or a quota society that can have as many partners as you wish. The limited liability companies don't have any type of limitation in terms of the initial capital. It can be as low as €1, but we usually do advise people that are incorporating, if they are requesting a D2 visa, an entrepreneur visa, we usually advise to have an initial capital of €5,000 per partner, because once the migration authorities will assess the process, they need to see that an investment was done and that is a sound investment, and that the prospective migrants to Portugal is someone that will or is serious about his investment. If you just incorporate with €50, it doesn't mean that the company cannot be successful, of course, but in terms of the migration part, it doesn't show a good or a strong effort in the company, because the initial capital is money that can be used for the acquisition of any services or property that the company needs to be a startup. And the other type of company that we have is the anonymous shares company. So this in Portugal is usually for big companies, because you do have some regulations or stronger regulations for the anonymous shares company, the SA in Portuguese. You do need a qualified accountant, so a different type of accountant that has more responsibilities. And it's usually way more expensive to have an anonymous share company comparing to a limited quota society. So in my experience, 99.9% of the people will be completely satisfied with the limited liability company, and the shareholder or the anonymous shares company is something that it's only used for or in use for big operations. Even big operations can be totally done with a limited quota company. In terms of the liability liability of the partners, it is exactly the same. So if the company goes under for if you have a share of an anonymous share company, you will only lose the money that the shares did cost you, or the money that you lent the company. The same applies for the limited liability company. If it goes under, the partners are only responsible for their own shares. So if they had a share of 5K or 5,000 euros, they'll lose that money, and that's about it. So those are the two main differences, and it's something that, in my experience, everyone goes to the limited liability company.
Okay, and just to extend somewhat to the self-employed area, and taking in a question from Mike Campion here that seems relevant. Do you have a sole trader structure? In the UK, it's called a sole trader. In the Netherlands, we have a formal sole tradership called the Eenmanszaak. But I guess for sole traders, it might still be the limited liability company or the green receipts thing, which you might tell us about now, right?
Well, the green receipts, the main difference is that if something goes wrong, your own personal assets are liable for any problems that occur. And with the limited liability company, the liability is all with the company, so your own assets are not at stake. This is important if you are operating in an area that litigation may occur and civil responsibility may occur. So it does depend on the area to the area. If you want to establish, let's say that you want to establish a company to do repairs, not a company, that you want to provide repairs, or that you are a craftsman and you provide services on those areas. I wouldn't say it's necessary to incorporate a company, because you can just invoice with the green receipts. Being a contractor in Portugal, the green receipts, I would say it's fairly easy. You still do need the NIF, the Portuguese tax number, it's mandatory. Then you would need to do a communication to the Portuguese tax authorities to state what is the line of business that you are going to do. And once you do that, and the tax authorities do open up the activity, you can start invoicing throughout the Portuguese web portal, the tax authorities web portal, with the green receipts. The green receipts are issued from your personal NIF, so it doesn't. It will appear your full name, your full NIF, and the address that you have registered within the tax authorities. And this may be a problem for some people, because it's their home address it's over there. So there is a way to circumvent this, to have a different address. If you have a permanent establishment, you can provide that data to the tax authorities. So once you invoice, at least your own personal address doesn't appear in the invoices. For people that are doing green receipts, they do have some fiscal obligations as well. It's delivering every 3 months the VAT tax return, and to pay the VAT as well as every 3 months you do need to present a social security declaration, and they will do the average of the last 3 months, and you'll need to do social security payments. So I would say that it's cheaper to be at least in the startup phase, it's cheaper to be a green receipt, because you don't need to pay the accountant or to pay the social security on an income that you may not have. Because if you are invoicing lower than 650 euros per month, your social security payments will reflect that. But for the manager, even if you are not earning 1 single cent, you will pay the social security as if you were earning the minimum wage in Portugal. So for the initial phase, I would say it's completely all right to be a green receipt issuing invoices. But if you want to scale up, I would say that the incorporation is the best way, especially if you want to hire people, to have work contracts, or to do renting contracts to obtain a car, or even to rent an office space. It's usually better to have a company incorporated, because you can separate the two spheres, your own personal sphere as well as the company sphere.
Okay, so quite complex, but we are taking it apart this evening and looking at the various options. Paul's saying there are some serious faces on this webinar, and yes, people are talking about money here, aren't they? And like trying to understand how to not fall foul of the Portuguese authorities. It's a good observation, Paul. And maybe we need the folks from the yoga retreat to just lighten us up a little bit.
Oh yeah,
with
definitely.
with some stretching for a moment.
It would improve at least my back, because my back is killing me. So yeah, I'm definitely up to it.
That's great. From my own personal point of view, just to explain to people a little bit more about the green receipts, the Recibos Verdes, they were literally green receipts, weren't they? They were like a little duplicate or triplicate.
Yeah. They were. Yeah, it is. It was a booklet that you purchased within the tax authorities. This was in the, I would say, 90s to 2000s, before the advent of the internet being massified. And you would issue the green receipts, and they would have a chemical paper behind it, and then you would need to present that one to the tax authorities, and they would see how much have you invoiced, and you would pay taxes on it. So they were actually green receipts on a booklet with chemical paper. It was a very crude way of doing the thing, but nowadays it is all electronic, but they're still green. So they kept it as a green fashion.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And you don't have to have this one for me, one for you, and one for the tax office.
That's
it is done through the Finanças portal. There is a portal.
Yeah.
There's another consideration, of course. You register on that. And then you say there, Daniel, that if you save money on accountancy, but I defy anyone to raise a green receipt who doesn't speak very good Portuguese without the help of an accountant, honestly. But it's all doable technically, isn't it, within the portal?
It is, and once you issue the first one, you will. It will be easy to issue the following ones. But yeah, I've had a lot of clients just puzzled, looking at me. How will I do this? Please, will you assist me? And I was just issuing the green receipt over here, because the dimensions that they have over there is for articles in the law. If you want this, it's this article in the law, but they don't explain what is in that article. You're just in the blind. So you'll need to consult the law. You'll need to see what's over there. And if you're not, if you don't know Portuguese, it can be quite difficult to issue a green receipt. So don't worry. I've taught other junior lawyers to issue green receipts. It's quite normal. People just get puzzled with the system, but well, it is what it is. It's the Portuguese tax authorities. So
yes, believe me, you will make dear friends. Anyone who can help you with the Finanças portal will become a dear friend for life, whether they like it or not.
Indeed.
So to further illustrate the distinctions here of the different kinds of companies and what might work, this is a real good case study here. Pam was a virtual assistant in the UK and planning to revive the business in Portugal. She's, of course, part of our Ask Our Expats team. I anticipate setting up as a self-employed, submitting the Recibos Verdes, the green receipts that we were talking about there, rather than setting up a company. What are the standard monthly commitments for this, i.e. social security? So you have indicated there to some extent, that it would be cheaper to go that route, and
yes.
For her it sounds like if she's not going into doing things where you need a lot of legal coverage and liability, this might sound like the right thing for Pam and somebody offering these sorts of consultancy services, right?
Correct, no doubt about it. If the area of the operation, the liability is small, and if you don't need a lot of materials to be purchased to do your activity, I would say just stick with green receipts, because they work and they're cheaper comparing to the option of incorporating a company. If your area of business is capital intensive and you do need to present expenses, then incorporating is the way to go, because all the corporation expenses is something that you can deduct from the profit of the company. It needs to be expenses that can be corporate expenses, because a lot of clients just ask me, well, what if I go to the grocery store with the card? Am I able to pay the groceries with the card? you will not be able to, or you can do it, but your accountant will just get mad at you because you'll be putting personal expenses on the company. But there are some things that are a bit borderline. I would say a car. A car can be used for personal use or to just visit clients. So there are some things that you can put on the account of the company, although in fact they may be used for personal use. That's things that happen, and it's a way of deducting the profit of the company, but do everything with the I wouldn't say the permission of your accountant, but at least with the knowledge of your accountant, and in doubt, ask the accountant if you can do that expense or not. That's my usual advice.
Yes, and we're talking about learning curves here, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely.
Ideally, it should get easier after that first assault on the steepness of the curve in the first few months. And then, as you say, after you've issued one invoice, you might be cut and pasting and knowing what to do. And it's the same. You'll learn from your accountant what sort of expenses you can rightfully declare and show.
I'll give my personal example. Once I started working as a lawyer, I was issuing green receipts, and there's a lot of lawyers in Portugal that are issuing green receipts. But if you want to scale up the operation, you need to incorporate, and that's what we did. So it would be possible just to carry on the operation with green receipts, but it would be difficult for us to deduct things like the office space or the car of the company, or even the utility bills and things like that, to have them deducted off the profit of a green receipt. You'll need to have an accountant. So at the end of the day, if you have an accountant for your green receipt operation, you might as well just incorporate and have the two situations separated. And I don't regret at the current moment to have the corporation established. I think it was a good way of having the separation between my personal assets as well as the company's assets. And one other personal example was in the I would say first 6 months or 7 months of our operation, we were not so organized with the accounting documents. So the accountant did, it was a list of about 20 documents that were missing, and we were not finding those documents. And we spent 3 or 4 people spent about, I would say, a good part of a day just searching and scanning our emails to see what was that expense and to have the documentation to prove that the expense, because all the money that gets out of the company needs a document to prove it. Portugal is the company of, or is the country of the documents and paperwork. So if you don't have the paperwork, it's a non-justifiable expense, and you will be taxed on it. So keep all your receipts, keep your accounting organized, and do simplify the life of your accountant with all the documentation as best prepared as possible.
There's some great advice right there. So is it true then that the idea that there are so many eucalyptus trees here is it for paper, for printing all these things on?
Oh yeah, I definitely. I do need to print everything to submit to my accountant, and every month he receives a folder this size with all the little papers that we do need to deliver to him. So yes, it's still a paper operation, and there's no way to circumvent that.
True, and that might be a good business opportunity for somebody here. Is encouraging Portugal to go digital at some point, and then you would get the full support of the population with that idea.
Please.
And it's also interesting you say that. It's in the culture, isn't it? So every time you buy a coffee and a pastry, for example, the shop owner is very keen to make sure you have your bit of paperwork for the smallest of transactions.
Yeah. And if that purchase is done throughout the company account, because you can have a lunch that is a business lunch with clients and all that, you do need to keep that ticket and then put it in the accountant documents, and the accountant will just go throughout all your receipts and will calculate your VAT at the end of the month. So yes. Every little piece of paper does an important role, especially if the money is being taken out of the company's account. If the money leaves the company account, it will need some paper trail to deliver to the accountant.
Okay, excellent advice, and well worth remembering to save yourself a lot of headaches later on.
Oh, yeah.
And time and energy, of course. So if we could, in terms of step-by-step and considerations, before we come back to these excellent questions that are collecting in the comments, what's the likely cost of setting up in this way, Daniel? We need to know that as well.
Well, it will depend on the options taken. If you decide to incorporate a company with your own name, it is a bit cheaper. Usually the biggest hurdle in incorporating a company is choosing the name. This is strange, I know, but once people are about to choose the name of the company, most of them stall and say, I haven't thought about it. What should I name my company? And in Portugal, you have roughly two ways of incorporating a company. You can just provide a list of 3 names, and we will do a certification or request the Portuguese authorities a certification of the name. They'll look into the 3 names in order of priority, and they'll choose one that doesn't coincide with other company that was already incorporated in the same line of business. Or this usually has a cost of 75 euros and the deadline is about a week. Or if you are in a rush, it's 150 euros and they do decide within 48 hours. If on the other hand, you want to incorporate a company with some of your names, it doesn't need to be all your names. It can be 2 or 3 if you have a big name of 5 or 7, or it can be just 2. As long as it's 2 names, that you are able to incorporate a company with your own names, and that will be free. You'll not need to pay any fees to the Portuguese state. Regarding the incorporation fees themselves, if it's a standard minus of incorporation, the state charges 220 euros for the incorporation. But if you want a non-standard letter of incorporation, that will be 360 euros of the fees. And our costs will depend on the type of company to be incorporated. But I will leave my email down the comment lines if someone does wish to contact us regarding the incorporation services. But those are the expected costs that you will have for the incorporation procedure within the Portuguese states. Opening a bank account in Portugal, a corporate bank account in Portugal usually doesn't have any fees, and the registry of the effective beneficiary that I spoke before, it doesn't have any fees as well. If it's done within the correct time frame, the Portuguese state will not charge any fees. So those are the main expected expenses that you can have.
Very good. Okay, and if you go and register with your local financiers for green receipts, I think there's a tiny fee, isn't there? Something like 15.
Yeah,
like that?
It's a tiny fee. I cannot remember the fee itself, but if you already obtained the NIF, usually what we do advise our clients is that they should swap the address between usually when people obtain the NIF, they obtain with fiscal representation and with the address outside of the country. Yeah. Our first advice is that the client should change the fiscal address to the Portuguese one if they have a rental agreement or if they bought property over here. And once they do that, they open the activity within the tax authorities. It is a small fee, nothing too worrisome. And once that is done, usually it takes about 24 hours, sometimes it's immediate to have that procedure done. You're ready to invoice and to start working for your clients.
Okay, excellent. All right, so we have some questions to address here. Let's get into some personal detail here from Denise. How do you find a reliable accountant, and what kind of monthly fees on average? So I think by global standards, the accountancy fees are fairly modest, and they do a lot for their money. But what sort of amounts are we talking about, Daniel?
Well, it does depend. In Lisbon, accountants do start at 150 euros plus VAT per month. So this is a monthly fee, and this is usually the amount that they do charge for startups.
Yeah.
If a company is generating a lot of documentation, if the fiscal obligations are high, as well as if a lot of workers are hired in the company, there will be a lot more work for the accountant, so his fee will get up. But my notion of the situation, and as you mentioned, Central Portugal quite a lot, if you are incorporating outside of Lisbon, my advice is to get a local accountant, and usually the prices are lower outside of Lisbon. So I would say they can range about €100 per month plus VAT if an accountant outside of Lisbon is hired. So this could be a general ballpark for you to have an idea of the cost of an accountant.
Yeah, and I've heard it's considerably cheaper out of Lisbon as well. And these folks can do payroll for you, and they can be something like a virtual finance director. So
Correct.
you can't always make a like with like comparison in terms of how professionals operate in Portugal.
Correct.
But the other part of that question was: is there a central registry of? Is there a code of conduct to find a good professional?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, as it happens with the lawyers, you have a web page that you can find accountants on a specific area. That is possible. Usually, we do recommend accountants that are of our full trust. It does depend on the profile of the client. For some types of profile, we do recommend one accountant, or for other types of profile, we do recommend other accountants. So it does vary a bit on the type of operation that you want to set up. But my strong advice is do find someone that speaks good English if you are a UK or a US national, because otherwise trying to communicate with an accountant in Portuguese, you may not understand the full implications of what you are getting into. And I would say it's important that the communication is really good and really strong, because as I said, the accountant is the best friend of an entrepreneur, at least in the first year.
Daniel, do you need a drink of water? We work you so hard.
Yes.
And I'll tell a little, while you have a little bit of a breather and a drink of water, I'll tell a little story to just back up exactly what you said there. I wanted to use the local accountant in my small town where I lived. And my first visit with him, there was a young lad sat in the office. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Is this the apprentice or something like that? And it turns out it was the son of the accountant who was translating everything for me.
Oh,
and it did become very, very difficult to have a conversation about your financial affairs through a teenage intermediary. So it's really important. Good English is very helpful in this regard.
Yes, no doubt about it.
Medical matters, money matters. It really helps a great deal to somebody.
No doubt.
And the people who tend to get a great reputation in Portugal, I think, certainly with the expats who are running companies, are the ones where they say, he's great or she's great. I just give them a bag of receipts every month and they tell me what I need to do by email. I get out my phone, I spark up the MBWay thing, and I just pay the thing, and it's all over and done with. Painless. Yes. And they do exist. Those people do exist. And it's word of mouth recommendations as well, isn't it? Along those.
It is. I would say word of mouth is important because one thing that you mentioned is relevant. Is the payroll. Accountants in Portugal do the payroll. They will send you the receipts for your workers, and they will send you all your fiscal obligations as well. So it is an important role, and finding someone that you trust, it is adamant, no doubt.
Absolutely. Joanna, what is involved in moving a company from another EU country to Portugal? Is it possible or the company needs to be deregistered in the country of origin and re-register in Portugal? So you'll have dealt with this sort of scenario, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, it does depend on how you want to set up the company. If it's convenient to have the company on the country of origin to invoice throughout over there because the fiscal laws of that country, I would just leave that company over there and carrying on business as usual. If on the other side you want to close down that company because it's not convenient anymore, I would definitely close the company over there and open a new one over here. There is a third option, that the company set up abroad is the sole owner or has a big portion of the company opened here in Portugal. So it is a possibility that a company abroad is the shareholder of a company here in Portugal, and it will be part of a group or of an umbrella of companies. This is totally legal and totally possible, but it will depend on the specific situation, the specific case, or the operation that you want to set up. If I would say if the scenario is not invoicing in the country that you were living, but it will be only invoicing throughout the Portuguese company, you might as well just close the dormant company. No point in just giving one company half asleep if it won't have any work or any invoicing to do.
Yeah, okay, and an extra cost, of course, for no good.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, did somebody say something there? There was a bit of a conversation going between Steve and Michael, and I think that we can make a general point of this, is if you're earning money, I mean, this is the question that Steve is asking. Is your company creating passive income, or are you doing stuff to generate sales money? I thought this is the important part. I thought if you're active, i.e. making money in Portugal, you had to have a Portuguese company. I mean, presumably you don't have to have a company, but if you're making money in Portugal, you have to make sure you are known to the taxation authorities. Either way, if the tax isn't due here for whatever scheme or whatever arrangements you've made, you need to be able to demonstrate that. It's not safe to assume these things, is it, Daniel? I don't think.
Well, if you are a tax resident in Portugal, even if the money is coming from a company abroad, you will need to pay taxes on that income, because as a fiscal resident in Portugal, you are taxed globally. Of course, this can be mitigated with the NHR that we covered last webinar, and it can be quite beneficial for someone that has a company opened abroad to be a fiscal resident here and request the NHR. But as a general rule of thumb, if the operation is going well in the country that you set up the initial operation, if it's working, don't move it, don't break it. That's the usual principle behind it. And I would say for companies, it's the same thing. If it's working, leave it as it is, control the company operations throughout Portugal if possible. Nowadays in the digital world, we have seen a big movement of people moving their personal operation to Portugal, but carrying on having their businesses in the UK, in the US, because they can run the company from their cell phones and from their email. So if it's working on the system that you know, carry on like that, because on the taxation level, it might be beneficial for you just to have the company abroad because of the NHR scheme that we mentioned in the last webinar. So if it's a project that you want to implement in Portugal and to sell products in Portugal or services in Portugal, it may be beneficial for you to incorporate here. Otherwise, probably it's a good option just to leave it as it was working on the home country.
So the key distinction there is where you're trading. If you're trading elsewhere, there is a way to manage that income and minimize your tax liability.
Correct. I would say so, yes.
If you want to start trading here, you will be within the compass of the authorities here.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, there's another part to this as well, isn't there, in terms of perception? I think it's very useful to be perceived as a company that's set up and trading legitimately in terms of the people you're supplying to, right? There comes a certain credibility with that.
Correct. It's people. It's fairly easy to trade in Portugal, but to have a company incorporated, it does provide trust in your business partners. And if you want to step up the game, I would say that the best way to do it would be to incorporate, because if you're just a small service provider, green receipts do work quite well, and you keep the expenses low. But to scale up and to provide confidence in the market, people will look at your initial capital of the company, will look if the operation is set up a few years ago. Usually when clients of, especially in the real estate markets. They approach me and they want to buy a property that is owned by a company. I do look into these things. I do see if the company is set up for a long time in Portugal, if they have an initial capital that is high, and all those details are assessed when you are in the market to see if you can provide confidence to anyone that you're dealing with.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. Joanna's very fascinated, I think, by the business lunches on the company. Nothing. I'm surprised there's nothing like that in Ireland, to be honest. But it's a thing for sure, isn't it? It's part of company and working life. We had Mayo in today installing the broadband system here, the fibre, in fact. And they went off for an hour's lunch. You know, this is an important thing in Portugal. And not only is that an institution, you can claim it against your tax as well, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. And Jerry makes a good point as well. There is an argument that if you're basing your business in Portugal, you should probably pay the taxes in Portugal. I think that's a good point. And, you know, people come here to enjoy the lifestyle. The lifestyle is as good as it is. And although people complain about paying taxes, there is a lot of public money invested into public life here, isn't there?
Correct. Well, Portuguese taxation is high, no doubt about it. And there are other countries in the EU that have lower taxation. But the public services here in Portugal, at least the health sector, is fairly good. The roads are good. So there is the public money being invested in the public sector. Although, of course, we as Portuguese people do criticize the Portuguese state quite a lot, because a lot of money is not well spent, but still you do have a fairly good public services that you can use, and those only run if people do pay taxes. So yeah, I do agree with Jerry, and he told me that once we were trying to set up the company here, so it was quite a phrase that I retained.
Yes. Daniel.reis at reispellicano.com is the email address. It is in the comment. And
I've commented over there, and before we finish the webinar, I'll put my email again.
Yeah, and do mention that you've come from Expats Portugal, with Daniel. I have a company, says James, in the UK and sell throughout the UK and EU, but not in Portugal. This is a good test of what we've been talking about. If I move to Portugal and do not set up a local company, does this make it more difficult to get a visa? So that's an interesting angle.
Well, it will depend. If you have a stream of passive income, and that can be easily displayed, either being via pension or rental property. So any way of demonstrating passive income that can lead to obtaining a visa here in Portugal. Even people that have companies and have the dividends distributed at the end of the year can use that as a source of passive income to obtain a visa here in Portugal. So if this is a scenario, I would use this scenario in your favor instead of just incorporating a company in Portugal, because there's one thing that people should be aware of. If you incorporate a company in Portugal and the company doesn't invoice, it doesn't work for the full period of the initial 2 years of the duration of the residency permit, once you are about to renew, the Border Patrol Police staff will look into it, will see if the company is a shell company and it was only obtained or it was only incorporated to obtain the visa, and they will refuse the renewal of the visa. So if the company is to be up and running, invoicing and making profit, and that will be a way of obtaining a visa, then for sure incorporate. But if other income streams are possible on passive income, my advice is to obtain a D7 visa on own income instead of connecting your stay in Portugal with a corporation.
Okay, James, I hope that's useful. And to everybody, I mean, we've many questions, many comments. If you're thinking, oh, Carl, you've missed it, or you haven't asked it, please pop it in again at the bottom of the comments there, and I'll do my best to incorporate and include it. This is a great question from Andrew Gilchrist. This is setting up a social enterprise company, I think. but there's a particular classification I know from the UK, and I think Andrew does too, the CIC, the Community Interest Company. What about these other sorts of structures that are probably in Portugal a bit more like the society or association type?
Yeah, it's the association. The structures are not so similar as the ones in the UK. So an association is a group of people that has a common interest and decides to get together and to put some money together and incorporate an association. That association cannot have the scope of profit, so it's not meant to be used as a source of obtaining profit. All the money that the association generates is to fulfill the scope of what the association was founded on. So let's say that you want to assist homeless people, and if you do some fund gathering, those funds will need to be used into assisting and helping the homeless with some assistance programs. So I would say that the associations in Portugal can be of a charitable character, or let's say an association for a band, for instance, playing or teaching people how to play instruments if you want to belong into a band. So recreational associations that are or that may be connected with some sports. Those are the types of structures that are usually used to benefit the community as a whole and not to obtain profit out of it. Of course, the association can have its own space and can have a cafe on its own space and charge for the things that are sold over there. But that money needs to be channelized. It needs to be channeled into the social scope of the association and not into the associates' pockets, let's say.
Yes, of course. One more question in this format, and then we'll go to our more informal setup. But this was asked earlier on and I missed it. Thanks for asking again, Matthew. A new company can have losses for the first year or two in some cases. How many years? This might be more of an accountancy question, but you may have some experience with this, Daniel.
Well, it's between 2 and 3 years, but if you have consistent losses, you'll have the tax authorities on your leg trying to see what's going on, because something fishy might be happening. So my advice is if you have consistent losses, probably the good idea would be to close down shop. It's between 2 and 3 years that you can have losses and that those can be deducted, and it does vary from case to case. But yeah, it's more of an accountancy question than a legal one on the legal department. But usually when that happens, my experience tells me that you'll have a visit of the tax authorities, and it's fairly common to have visits of the tax authorities. We've had one once we incorporated. They knocked on our door and I was like, hello, how may I assist you? Oh, we are the tax authorities. We would like to motivate people to invoice. Could you please show us all your last invoice? And I said, sure. I went to the accounting program, I printed the last invoice, and there you go. But they paid us a visit already. So it is, I would say, fairly normal.
And if you take them out for lunch, I mean, can you claim that against taxation?
I wouldn't try that.
One more question before we thank you for this amazing amount of information you've given us tonight. But to hire someone in Portugal, can I do it under self-employment, which you call green receipts? So yeah, you can. I've used the word avoid loosely here, but you can associate with other green receipt givers, can you, as a way of employing people?
That's totally possible. You can associate with other people that are issuing green receipts, and you can even hire someone. Let's say that you have someone to pick up the phones. With a green receipt, you can hire someone to do that. But the problem is that in Portugal, the labor laws are protective of the workers. So, and the courts are, in generally speaking, protective of the worker. So if any litigation occurs and that person is employed for you in the last, I would say, 5-10 years, this is a risk of you needing to pay a high compensation to that person if something goes wrong, or if you need to fire him without any reason that was caused by the worker. So if you just need to fire him because the work is low, you'll still need to compensate that worker. And this can be a serious problem, because as a general rule of thumb, you can count with 1 month of reimbursement. It's a little bit less nowadays, it's 20 days for each year that person worked for you. So if it's 10 years, you'll almost need to pay 10 salaries to that person to terminate the work contract. So it's best that you do it throughout the company, because this is a source of litigation. And in my opinion, if you do need to hire workers, not service provider, but workers, do think about incorporating a company.
Okay, very, very interesting. And yeah, that's a good point to be made and reiterated there, that the law does look after employees pretty well, doesn't it? And when people discover, maybe we should mention this, that discover that people actually get contracted for 14 months a year, don't they?
Oh yes, definitely. The work contracts in Portugal, you work 11 months because you have 1 month off in holiday, but the worker gets paid in 14 months because you have the summer allowance, or the summer subsidy, as we call it here in Portugal, as well as the Christmas allowance, and those are 1 extra month of salary that you pay. So instead of paying 12 salaries, you do pay 14 salaries.
That's very interesting. And if we've gone from serious faces to, wow, that's interesting faces, I think in webinars tonight. And maybe, you know, you could do a couple of birds with one stone here, and have loads of children to help Portugal's
definitely
population deficit.
Yeah,
and employ your
great,
kids. Yeah, employ your kids long term as well. But they probably got rights as well in the companies. Daniel, we have more questions, but let's go to those in a more of an informal hands up situation.
Of course,
we've missed this evening. But Daniel, I have to say to you, sterling job, fantastic. You give us so much information. We're getting lots of rounds of applause. Everybody's muted, but we're seeing a lot of appreciation from the faces in the webinar. Thank you so much, Daniel Reis of Reis Pellicano. I'll make sure your email address, contact details are in the recordings, and they are in our comments tonight as well. Daniel, thank you so much.